Hi everyone, I'm Brian Garibaldi, and today I'm going to talk about parenting, and I'm going to talk about the first phase, the first step called Parenting Alliance. So, that's the first step I usually start with when I talk to parents is Parenting Alliance. I think it's the most important foundation, and I always, like when I run groups, because I do parenting groups, when I do groups with people, we always go back, we often do a check-in, how's the Parenting Alliance going, because it's so critical. Parenting alliance is basically how are the parents working together? Are they on the same page? If parents aren't on the same page working together, it's very possible for a chaos to ensue in all sorts of ways. So we always check in, parenting alliance. Always important to remember this helps the kids. This helps your kids in so many ways. Kids need security, they need predictability. And when the parenting alliance isn't there and stuff's a little more chaotic, it can start seeds for insecurity and anxiety and stuff. And let's not do that. Let's do awesome parenting, parenting alliance. There's all sorts of implications on this, whether you're a single parent, whether you're divorcing, whether you have other caregivers and stuff like that. And so I'm going to actually dig into a lot of these things. And hopefully it's very useful for you guys. So sometimes I think the parenting alliance, even though it sounds good, should really be called the caregiver alliance. All right? Because the parenting alliance really needs to overlap into anyone who does any kind of parenting. Whether you have a nanny that's more than just like covering on like Friday night or something, a caregiver nanny, or even grandparents. Anyone who's providing any kind of significant kind of parenting time kind of generally needs to be on the same page. Sometimes there's slightly different rules, and that's fine. I think kids can actually adjust to those pretty well. But especially in philosophy, everyone needs to be as much on the same page and coordinated as you can get. This can sometimes be an issue, like maybe it's almost cliche, like the grandparents being much more flexible or allowing a lot of candy, or parents maybe grandparents allowing like tons of screen time. And again, it's okay if there's different rules, but if that kind of undermines the other parenting ideas, it can be a problem. So getting together with them, be like, hey, it's important that your son or your daughter isn't on screens for 8 hours a day because they're 4 or something like that. You need to sit down with them, right? And often, once you explain, hey, this helps them, talk about maybe screen time or technology use or something bad for them, they might go, oh, here's why. Usually, if there's a good relationship with them, it's no problem. Sometimes it can continue to be a problem, and it kind of has to be dealt with and kind of managed, or kids may be shielded from a little more. But again, I'm talking about being on the same page, and it's often important to parents talk about that. So one of the most important things on the same page, it's important that parents do not undermine each other. It's important that mom doesn't talk, on a base level, doesn't talk bad about dad, dad doesn't talk bad about mom, or even undermining the rules. Hey, mom said I'm not allowed this after 8 p.m., that the dad says, oh, it's okay. Again, there's some room for flexibility, but some obvious undermining is really bad. What that does is it takes the power away from the parents, and it makes their rules or decisions they make way more gray and way more flexy. It's really bad. So not undermine each other, and this can happen in so many ways, especially like divorced parents. You can see how this could like really super happen. I'm not going to get into divorced parents a ton here. They could probably have its own like full-length video on that, because those situations can be much more complex and much more difficult to work with. So not undermining each other, being aware of when you do. It's also important that they support each other, support the limits or consequences or rules that the other parent says. All right, so like actively doing that, intentionally doing that with intentionality. So I'm going to get into more details about how you exactly do this in Parenting Alliance. And I'm going to start with what I call the proactive side of things. How do you proactively have a parent alliance? Well, the first thing you can do is for parents to sit down and have separate time where they have a meeting and they plan, hey, what are our rules? What are these kids allowed to do? What kind of activities should they be in? But just sit down kind of at planning meeting to kind of go over, hey, if they do break this rule, what are consequences? What do we do? Do we give timeouts? Do we do this? Do we take phones away? And for how long? And there's a lot of stuff that's very predictable because families have encountered them probably time and time again, about like phone use or, for example, and things like that, that you can really sit down and get a good idea. Not saying you can always predict exactly, but sitting down to make sure you're on the same page, whether you're like, hey, I don't think their phone should be taken away ever, whatever those rules are. Let me cut and go back again. Is that I say I'm like directive, I'm telling parents what to do, but I don't tell them exactly what the consequences should be. I like to talk through and be like, what's appropriate, what matches your family, what's your values, and things like that. But the proactive planning on what the consequences are, especially if kids have any kind of specific issues where you know that's going to happen. I know I use my example. My 3-year-old toddler often takes the toys out of my 15-year-old's hands. This is a predictable thing. It's going to happen multiple times this week. It's good we know exactly how we handle stuff. Maybe even important that we don't overreact. Say, how do we handle the situation? What do we do? When we're on the same page with that, it's very easy to implement and follow through. I think it's also important to note, I think there's many relationship aspects about parenting alliance, about how healthy like a marriage is, for example, or for a divorced family, how healthy the parents are working together. That can totally impact the parent alliance. All right, it's a very real thing. So it's important to keep in mind, but again, I'm not going to dig into that quite yet, but for sure it can be an issue that really undermines some parenting alliance. Let's see here. I want to go over next the second part. One was the proactive side. I want to go back to more of a reactive side of parenting, what I call the parenting front lines. This is when the heat's on. This is when little Johnny does something either you did not anticipate or was egregious or something like that. What do you do, and how do you maintain a parent alliance in that moment of parenting? I think so much parenting happens in this front lines when stuff's going down, and it's good to plan and meet so you kind of know how to deal with that. But what do you do when it's there and you're not sure what to do? All right. Again, I think it's important not to undermine the other parents at the time. All right. If they're saying, little Johnny, you're grounded from the computer for a week, that the other parent is like, no, not a week. That's not right. You can't have some obvious undermining right in front of the kids. It's a good idea to try and never disagree about parenting things. You could disagree about other intellectual discussion, but about parenting things in front of the kids. That discussion should be taken offline. It means a separate meeting or something like that. But in that moment, it's good not to like disagree right in front of the kids about parenting stuff specifically. I think it's also important that parents don't get in the habit of making setting dramatic consequences in that moment. Little Johnny pushed his cup off the counter and you're grounded for a whole month. Okay, is that appropriate? It's a little dramatic. Does the other parent sit and let that consequence fly? That's a tough position. I just said not to disagree, but the first parent might have super overreacted. So parents being mindful about the reaction and kind of, you don't necessarily have to relay a consequence right at that moment to set a limit and things like that. So make sure one parent doesn't necessarily overreact, so the other parent's put kind of in a bad position and has to support this bad consequence. Which leads me to one of my favorite things parents can do in those moments is what I call a parenting timeout. So if the child does something that's egregious or bad, you haven't anticipated, parents don't know what to do, or parents have some hints of disagreeing, they go, hold on a second, parent timeout. Me and mommy, we're going to the other room and we're going to chat for a second. All right? So the kids are out there wondering what's going on. Parents go around, have a meeting. Were they supposed to do this? Are they allowed? Did they know? What's the consequence? Whatever. Parents get together, hone the alliance, come out, hand in hand, arm on shoulder, or whatever. Or at least theoretically. All right. Hey, here's what me and mommy decided. Here's what's you're in trouble for this. And you sit there together and be like, and here's the limit and here's the consequence. There's no TV today. My examples may reflect where I'm at with my kids, which are little, so bear with me. And together you make this consequence, and here's the rule, and here's what's going to happen, in a hopefully calm way. And I think it's a very powerful thing. I think kids respond to that. I think for kids to fight that time and time and time again, there's usually something going on with the kids extra. But I think it's very powerful, and it, even though kids might not like it, there's almost a secure feeling to that. The parent in charge, here's the deal. It's predictable what's going on. There's no undermining. I think this is also important when some kids like intentionally try and split parents. They know mom said one thing and they try and go to dad to get it done. All right. This to me in principle is an egregious offense. Any attempt to split parents should have consequences. That's how serious the parent alliance is. Is that attempt to split parents is that they should get together and be like, here's what it is, the parents working together, so kids don't try that or know they can do that. So it's a strong parent team or caregiving team. So this accomplishes lots of things. I think this is really a super big foundation to parenting. Again, whether you're a single parent and it's your other caregivers you're coordinating with, or more traditional family, it provides such a foundation for a lot of things to be successful as a parent, to help your kids, reduce anxiety in your kids, a sense of control, the household's under control, and there's some direction here. And again, Parenting Alliance is a huge foundation. The next video, we're going to go over my next step, which is alliance with your children. That's all.